All right, we'll start with roll call. Chair Kennedy,
Here.
Vice Chair Goodman,
Here.
Member Fan will be joining us shortly. Member Miller is excused. Member Riordan,
Present.
Member Suttles,
Here.
Member Thomas.
Here.
All accounted for so far. Now we have the approval of the minutes from the July 2nd Workforce Housing meeting.
Can we request a motion?
I second. We approve it.
We need a first.
Okay.
I'll motion to approve.
All right. Roger first, Randy second. All in favor?
Any
Motion.
opposed? Oh, sorry.
All right. Motion carries. All right. So now we're moving to policy. Thank you, Amber, for sending this in advance and giving us a little time to look at the red lines.
No, that's okay. So we're going to actually start with the trends anyways, and then we'll get into the red line. So hopefully Member Fan will be here by then. So as we talked at the last meeting, Council reviewed the workforce housing policy draft in May. And then afterwards, we sat with them, and these are some of the trends that we saw. So what you see here will be reflected in the red line that we'll be going through next. So there was support overall. There was general support for the policy direction. There was requests for stronger connection and tie into the strategic plan, vision, and mission, because it is listed in the council strategic plan that they established last December. Might have been January. And then they requested some clarification on the income formula so that anyone could do the math themselves and see exactly how we got the numbers that we got. And project eligibility, clear fee definitions, impact fees versus other fees. They felt that it was a little too muddled. And then clear certification criteria to keep the process unbiased. So a simpler fee sliding scale, longer affordability period, preference for city may versus city will. And that one was also highly encouraged by our legal department for some sections that it says may and not will, just so the city isn't legally obligated for certain things that we need to look into further. Less administrative approvals, more council approvals. Expedited review is updated with the new Senate bill, the state Senate bill. And then parking was overall unsupported by all of the council members that we met with. So we kind of rephrased that to include restrictions only on a case-by-case basis with a neighborhood analysis and council approval. Framing, present concepts were strategies to study, not fixed rules. Because as we go through some of them, we might learn that it's not as feasible as we expected. So we'll kind of go through all of that and what that looks like. There's some other edits just to clean things up. The water incentives policy section is much shorter, just to say, please refer to any workforce housing initiatives in the water policy. The pre-approved plans has been updated to the home of my own since that's been worked through. Sustainability efforts, they wanted that tied primarily to external funding. So if there were sustainability efforts, they wanted that to be mostly covered by federal funding or state funding, not by local funding. Legal will continue refining things and looking at things, especially as the committee goes through them. Community development has been very hands-on, and the city manager has also been reviewing it as well. So as we go, if things are suggested today, they'll review those too, just to make sure that they are something we can do, that we can put in there, things like that. Today is a great opportunity for our new members that as we go through it, if you want to see something else put in there, we'll need some sort of consensus from the majority of the committee, but we can look at adding things in. If it's something we've already talked about, today will be a really good day to kind of go through why it's not in there, things like that. So please feel free to put things in, talk about it. Any of the input that was received from council is up to the committee how much or how little you want in there. So we can revert back to the original if you liked that better. Just keep in mind that council is going to have the ultimate final say, so their input is very important. But it's up to you if it's something you guys want to discuss with them when it comes back to council in December of, you said you wanted this taken out, but we really felt it was important to have this in. That's why we kept it in, and this is why we feel that way. So we can work through that as we go. So IT, if you'll switch to the red lines. Does anybody have any questions before we dig into the red lines? And we can, if anybody has any other introductory stuff, we can go through that as well. Now we'll wait. Just a reminder, housekeeping with your mics. You have to hold it the whole time. The whole time. All right, so we'll start going through. Sorry if it's a little small. That one's bigger, but the headers haven't changed much other than we did change home of my own program to say home of my own program. So this section, there was some input recommended for some just reverbiage, overall economic development and public safety of the community. And I'll have to get my original out if you have questions about what they were originally, but they wanted public safety in there too. And then can overcome today's barriers to create and maintain a sustainable environment where members of our workforce and their families have access to safe and affordable housing. I want to say that at some point there was the word inclusionary in there, then that was not a well-received word. So, or inclusive. But does anybody have any concerns with that page or those edits?
Amber, I know we talked about this, but I don't know if we talked about it with the whole committee. The red lines is context that they've added, but there are other sections we'll see where there are suggested lines through for removal. Is that right?
Yes, in this presentation, it just has the recommended input. So in the packet that you all received, it had the slashed through sections that were changed and edited, but we'll go through each one and I can read what the original verbiage was too. And I'll actually pull that up so I can do that.
Would it be possible to work off of that one just for efficiency's sake? Can we mirror that one to the screen?
We should be able to. IT, I'll move it to the chamber computer in just a second, and then we'll put it up. It's a PDF, so I'm not sure how well it'll look up there, but we'll give it a go. Okay, IT, it should be in there, and I don't know if there's a way we can present the red line so I can clicker it, but. Perfect, okay, so this is the red line version. It's gonna be probably a little bit small, but we'll do our best with it and go from there. So,
Zoom in a little bit on some parts.
maybe? I don't know how, but we'll get through it. This one was just updating. Since everybody's kind of changing around a bit, we'll add our new members in as well. And everybody just gets to be named since we've had different chairs and vice chairs and things like that. So nothing too exciting. Home of my own program. Naturally, all of the page numbers changed. Here we go. So it said overall economic stability. They wanted to change that to development. And it said social cohesion. They changed it to public safety. And then the original was by implementing a comprehensive workforce housing policy, the city of Prescott can oh, no, it's small. Thank you. Can foster a more inclusive and sustainable environment where all members of our workforce have access to safe and affordable housing. And their recommendation for that one was can overcome today's barriers to create and maintain a sustainable environment where members of our workforce and their families have access to safe and affordable housing. So Any questions or anything? That was just a long way of really just getting rid of that inclusive word.
And then
All right, so next page. So, perfect. On this one, our initial one was costs of local services may increase. Prescott may experience less diversity in its population and service providers may become disconnected from the community. It was suggested that it be changed to Prescott's average age will continue to increase without new additions of families, putting additional strains on public safety and traffic. So, how does everybody feel about that change? And then this paragraph was recommended to really tie it into the council strategic plan as kind of a reminder to everyone, including the public, that it is in the council strategic plan that workforce housing is a priority. So that it just kind of helps with cohesiveness of all of our different plans and documents. So minor changes on that last paragraph. Next page.
Amber, I apologize for my tardiness to begin with. Did you guys, all of these changes, were these staff or council, or where did these changes come from?
Most of them are from the different council members we met with. We tried to follow trends, so if there was only one council member who didn't like something, we tried to only put in ones that were seen from a variety of them. There are some things that legal recommended, like when we get to the changes of wills to mays, that was legal suggested. So, but most of the changes have been from the concept, at least, of council. There's been some reverbiage just by city staff, but the concepts of the changes have been from council.
Okay, great, thank you.
So this policy outlines eligibility criteria for both the workforce developers and employers. They felt it was important to have employers in there as well. And then down towards the income limitations, this is where they had requested it be clear of what that means and how we even got that. So the formula used, things like that. So just kind of more elaborated of what we had in there before.
I think that's a nice change. It's very clean.
And then that way, if the numbers the numbers will change. When they change, people can look up what the average median income is, and then they can kind of sort it themselves as well. For the residency requirements, this was kind of a bit of a sticking point for quite a few of the council members because they were very clear that we can only affect what's happening in city limits and really only have, anything within the city limits. So though it is a regional issue, we have no control over anything outside the city limits. So quite a few of them said that they would like that to be specific to the city limits.
I understand we can't affect building outside of the city limits. However, we can't tell a person who lives in Prescott that they can't work in Prescott Valley. So I think we might need to look at how that's worded. Because if I'm reading it, we're saying they have to work in Prescott.
Correct. They want it to be people who are working in Prescott, because if they're working in Prescott Valley, then they're not Prescott's workforce.
But if they live in Prescott, they're contributing to the Prescott economy by shopping, living, paying taxes. I think this is a sticky point for me. I don't know how you guys feel.
And my easy answer is I'll change it to whatever you guys want me to.
I think it goes back to the history of being siloed, and a win for Prescott is a win for the region. I would hope that we could just phrase it as this policy is intended to benefit those who live in the city limits of Prescott.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. What if they work remote? What if they fly somewhere for their job? Are we not going to support that? No.
So the only part I'd say about those who live in the city of Prescott is most of our workforce doesn't. So I think that's kind of how we ended up with the Yavapai County to start with, is some live here and commute elsewhere, some. So thoughts on that.
I mean,
Yeah,
I was going to say, depending on the structure of how we finance these things, somebody works inside as an employee, and then, 5 years from now, they decide to work in the private sector. What happens to that money that has been given? In some communities I've seen, they have to sell the house or pay that money back immediately. It really kind of puts a wrench in things. So I think extracting that would be a good move.
I can see both sides, I guess, and I'm not really sure how you would enforce it, right? I mean, are we really thrashing about something that may not be enforceable anyway? Because to the point, if you start working in Prescott, but then your job changes and you're not necessarily going to move, how does that really change what your housing is? Because the housing's already been created by the contractor, and you just continue. So I don't have a lot of passion. If somebody does and they want to leave it, I would say leave it, but I just don't know how that's going to be enforceable. So
Yeah, and to be, just to throw the devil's advocate to spark debate, we're the Prescott Workforce Housing Committee. So we're talking about workforce housing for people that work in Prescott. So there is two sides to this debate. I get where they would, when we start deviating for workforce in other communities, are we going down a lane are we getting outside of our lane, I guess would be the devil's advocate.
So let's use
you
a
could
real
argue
world.
both ends of it.
Yeah, let's use a real world example. They only deliver babies at the Prescott Valley Dignity Health campus, right? So you're going to say a labor and delivery nurse that lives in Prescott shouldn't be able to find attainable housing to deliver babies for families at Prescott? It just sounds like ludicrous to me. I think we need to focus on the fact that we're really looking at incentives for housing in Prescott that benefit employees and not the other way around.
I agree, because also, what about promotion? What about advancing one's career? If they took a job here, they qualified and they got the workforce deal, and 5 years later, like they were saying, then what? He can't take the promotion? No, that's not what America's based on. No.
So what we can do in this case is we can go back to the original verbiage if everyone's still okay with that. And then that can be a discussion that we have at the study session in December with council, and hopefully come up with either a happy medium or even just having the discussion so they understand the full viewpoint. And so we can go back to the original for that part.
I'd just like to say that there are two major employers, Dignity Health, YRMC, and YC, both have campuses in Prescott and Prescott Valley. My girlfriend, who was a YC employee, worked at both campuses depending on what they needed. So there's the case where employees of both employers would most likely go back between the two campuses, being Prescott Valley.
So maybe for a compromise, do you guys think they live in Prescott? That way we're still addressing the Prescott verbiage that they're looking at.
Well, and maybe whoever wrote this said this policy is intended to benefit. They took out workforce applicants must be employed. So maybe the intent is to leave some wiggle room there.
And my only input would be, I don't have an opinion that much either way. So you could put those living in the city limits, but if we have employee incentives, I believe about 60% of our employees don't live within city limits. So that would exclude 60% of at least our workforce. I imagine the other municipality or other employers are similar. So finding a way to include both would be good, but I don't know.
You have a point, Mike, about intended. It's not, doesn't have a lot of teeth.
I'm just here to do whatever you guys tell me. So if you want to keep the original, we can. If you want to leave the council suggestion and have a further conversation, since it is kind of, it's intended to do that, I'm happy to do either.
I know we're skipping ahead, but my question would be, maybe this would answer it. The eligibility certification, has a proposed form already been drafted? Because if they're not asking those questions, then maybe we're just speaking in circles.
So we aren't drafting technically anything form-wise until council actually approves parts of it, but we do anticipate any forms that are needed, which there's a couple different sections of this or processes that would be on the staff level. We are hoping to work with Elliott and Pollock to help draft those, but the policy has to be approved first, so none of the actual forms have been created yet.
Maybe there's an addition that you just comma as outlined by application, etc.
And we can absolutely keep the original, and then it would just be a discussion with council, which it's going to be anyways. So, yeah, we can keep the original and then go from there and see where it grows. And someone on the dais may have a suggestion of, what about this verbiage? And it's like, oh, that's the one. So it's all just a conversation. Next page. If you'll scroll down to affordability requirements, there we go. So this is where it was suggested by numerous council members that they wanted it to be 30 years. Again, that's something we can keep as 20, we can even put as 10, and it can be a conversation that you all have during the study session. So the number is up to you on if you want to keep what their suggestion was or go back to the original.
Well, I, for one, am really opposed to the 30-year lockdown deal because we're trying to attract developers, and I think 30 years is an awful long time. With that said, we can develop a stair-step program if you, depending on how much assistance you receive from the city and forgiveness and funds and those kinds of things. Maybe there are those 30-year projects because they receive so much, but maybe there's those 10 or 20-year projects because they receive less assistance from the city. The 30-year thing, I mean, I get it. We don't want to kick our elders out like what's happening right now. But at the same time, we don't want to discourage our developers to come in and do a project because they can't look 30 years down the road to get to market. I just think that's too long.
2 notes on that. We'll have an update on, can we have an update on LIHTC during the staffing part? Okay, we'll have an update on that too. The only issue I could see with the stair stepping is they had requested the or as stipulated by city guidelines removed because they wanted it to be a firm number. So I don't know if there's going to be flexibility on that end, but again, I'll put in whatever you guys want there.
That's just me. I don't know how everybody else feels.
I have a question. If this was a single-family new home project ownership, how could we enforce a 30-year rule on a home ownership?
So it would come down to either a development agreement or a deed restriction. So that'll get worked out probably more on the staff level with legal on depending if it's a big project where we're coming in with 50 workforce housing homes, then they'll have to either agree in the development agreement that they'll keep it that affordability. And if they end up selling it, then they have to make sure that the next person knows that they have to. So there's deed restrictions we talked about in there too, and there's some restrictions on how they would do it, but it'll be ultimately up to the people receiving the incentives, how they are going to assure that they're going to do it from our previous discussions.
After our discussions with Flagstaff too, they rely heavily on the HOAs to monitor this, and that's who they talk to quite often is the HOAs, or whatever, if there's a management company, if it's apartments, that's who they rely on to monitor and maintain that. But yeah, deed restriction is the way to cover that.
Yeah, I was a recipient of a first-time home buyer, and I had a deed restriction of either only 2 or 4 years, not 30. I ultimately stayed in the house for 26 years, but obviously 2 or 4 years is more appealing to a buyer of a deed restriction.
Up to you guys on what number you want there.
I guess I would say that I know 30 is fairly common. It's a pretty national standard, so I get why they're saying that. I appreciate that there's a caveat there that says it may be adjusted with, XYZ. So it does provide some wiggle room.
Yeah, the bottom line is the best scenario is in perpetuity. I mean, we want this to last forever. Well, that's what we want. But we also need to attract developers. I think the language that they've added does provide them to, if somebody comes in with good reasons to reduce that number, they can go to council and ask the number to be reduced. And I think it allows for that. My thoughts.
And we can always come back if you think of something later, though IT might not like me saying that right now. But if you think of something later, we can come back and talk about it further as well. So, IT, if you'll go to next page. With the workforce housing certification, we had mentioned it in the original draft quite a few times, but never really fully spelled out what it meant. So we actually took out the workforce housing certification blurbs in a lot of them and just put that verbiage and put the actual full explanation up front. They wanted to make sure that there was some clear criteria so that everyone was treated fairly and everyone got the same kind of treatment, and that if they didn't meet these, they couldn't qualify for it. So the first one just kind of explains of what it is. Again, a form will be built once, if this is approved by council, then staff will go through probably with Elliot and Paula, because they're kind of the experts on this thing, and we'll build the form with them. But it has to hit the income area that we're looking at. There needs to be, and I don't know what your thoughts are on the minimum workforce housing units, because I know in the past you've talked about if it's 1 unit, that's plenty, so, or that's more than we had. And there is some flexibility on some of these where if they want to vary from that, if they're only building a couple units, they can go to council to have that part waived if they want to. Affordability duration, that they have to agree to that unless otherwise adjusted by council. It has to comply with the applicable design and density standards, meet any required zoning, and then the developer has to have good standing with the city as well. So do you guys have, and IT, if we could scroll down a little bit just to make sure I'm not missing, I feel like I am missing a little bit. It has to be obtained for every project. So just because one developer gets it for this big project, that doesn't mean they get it for all of their projects. And it has to be reviewed and approved, that it meets the above requirements, and then a copy of that certification must be submitted with each permit application, which should be easy. We plan on it being a 1 sheet. They did it, they qualify for this, good times. So does anybody have any concerns or want any edits to that? This is a brand new portion spelling out, so we can adjust this as you guys see fit.
Well, what about the 20%? What's the feeling on that, guys?
I personally think the sliding scale is the path to pursue, right? And if we start at 20, that's fine. But, if they have more than that, to reward them for, contributing. So I like the sliding scale. Where it starts, I don't have a lot of passion. 20, 15% is fine. But let's reward the good behaviors to incent them.
That's actually a really easy
Well, I
thing
always
to put
felt
in.
that if they do 1, I'm okay with that. That's like Amber said. I was the one that said that. 1's 1 more than we currently have. So I don't know that I like the 20% lock. As a developer, it puts handcuffs on me.
So
That could be our stated goal, try to achieve 20%, but to handcuff them, I don't know.
and I can actually just put in there, refer to sliding scale for fee waivers, things like that. So we can change that one a bit to not necessarily be minimum, but they do at least have to have part of it being workforce housing or they don't qualify for anything. So I can work on the verbiage of that one a bit.
I like the sliding scale also.
So is that sliding all the way down to 1 unit like you're suggesting? Yeah, as long as the fee and waiver criteria is set up to prevent abuse, I would agree, but we'd want to think about that to make sure it's not abused.
I do have a question actually.
Hang
Now
on.
I'm thinking about that. Oh,
Hang
go
on a
ahead.
second. Well, Mike, put your developer hat on. So you're laying out a project and you want to put this 20% because that's the requirement. And you're right on the edge of making it financially work, not work. And so you walk away from it. That's what I don't like. You know what I mean? You've been there. I've been there. You know, is it going to work? I hope. Maybe it'll work. I'd like to know it's going to work. So if I was able to reduce it to 10%, then I know it would work. See, that's the point.
Again, I think the key is in the fee waivers and reimbursements. If we set up the rules and regulations of that end to where it can't be abused, then I would agree.
No, it's okay. I answered my own question, so we're good. So I'll adjust that to talk about the sliding scale. And if at the next meeting you decide you want to put a minimum in there of 10%, we can add that in. That's easy enough. All the rest of it makes sense though and pretty standard. Okay. So, and then at the bottom, there was just a recommended input that kind of pulls back into another document we have, which is our economic development strategic plan. So if we can support managed growth, they wanted managed growth. And then to fuel and jumpstart our economic development strategic plan while ensuring that housing needs of the local workforce are met in a sustainable and transparent manner. So that just kind of ties in that we understand that workforce housing is also part of economic development, and where there's economic development growth, there's going to be workers, and it all kind of ties in together. Next page. So this one has a lot more red, but we rewrote it to try to clarify the difference between the different fees, because the council members felt that it was a bit muddled of what actually counts as an impact fee, what is a just normal fee that we can waive. So we tried to just make it much clearer. So there's the fee waivers and reimbursements, development impact fees. It gives people the state statute that they can look at too. And then it goes into non-development impact fees and what exactly those are, and that it excludes impact fees, and that waivers and reimbursements are for the development related fees on a sliding scale based on the percentage of workforce housing. So initially we had, I think it was like if you had 25%, you got 50% waived. It was kind of they wanted it to match more. If you are providing 25% of your total units as workforce housing, then you get 25% of fees waived or reimbursed. So they just wanted it to match percentage for percentage. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about any of that?
Yeah, I got one. Sorry. Developmental impact fees. Are we there? Are we talking about that right now?
Kind of. It gets there in two parts. So this one's kind of the introduction of there are two types of fees. There's impact fees, which are fully restricted by ARS codes, and then there's non-development impact fees. IT, if you go to the next page, that goes more into waivers and reimbursements, what can be waived, what can be reimbursed, and then after that, it goes into a whole section about impact fees specifically.
Well, wait a minute, back under 2A, it says, these fees are not discretionary charges and cannot be waived by the city. Cannot, that's,
So they can't be waived. They have to be paid by either the city through taxpayer funds or by the developer. So we can't waive them and just make them go away. But it explains it more. But yeah, we can't waive those ones. We have to pay them one way or another. So
I know, but if I was a developer reading that, that would make me think, okay, I got to pay it no matter what. And we know that we're working on potentially something where we can work around that. So can we just change that somehow to say something different?
that paragraph was from legal. So I would say no on that one. But if they want to keep reading to the next section, it goes into a bit more of deferral of them. So we cannot waive them. We can defer them or we can pay them. And there's some verbiage on that as well that council wanted to say that the city can pay the impact fees on behalf of the developer using taxpayer funds. They wanted it very clear in there that the funds that would be used are taxpayer funds to pay it. So yeah, the first page is, or first part, section 2A is kind of just an intro, but that first paragraph was written by legal, so I would hesitate to change that at all. I can always ask, but, okay. Which I don't see Matt in here, but, so I can ask and see. Oh. Okay, I'll catch him. No, it's okay. I'll get him later. But I'll ask about that and see if we can at all change just that word. But I know that that's one that's kind of, that was something across all council members that they wanted it very clear that they aren't getting waived, they aren't getting ignored or forgiven, that they are being paid one way or another. So, but I can ask. And then this one, the section 2A for development fee incentives, continued, is breaking down the fee waivers at the time of permit issuance or fee reimbursements after completion of the workforce units. So I'll let everybody kind of read through there and see if you have any issues with those, and then we can get into the second section on development impact fees.
What was the rationale behind the recommendation to have the waiver versus the reimbursement? I see that they're using the 80% AMI as the differentiating factor, but why?
I don't really have a great reason of why. That was just more, I know that we wanted options for waivers versus reimbursements so that if people needed to wait until later in a program, but we can change any of those numbers to where they make sense.
I would just vote to simplify it personally. Like,
So what parts? Would you want just having that sentence taken out of both?
I guess I'd like to ask our developers over here, builders, does it matter significantly one way or the other to you if it's a waiver or a reimbursement?
Well, I think when you go to page 10, they do talk about, because impact fees fund public infrastructure, these fees cannot be waived. However, if the city council determines that a qualified workforce housing project provides a substantial public benefit, the council may, on a case-by-case basis, authorize the city to pay a portion of the impact fee. So I think it addresses it.
So that's actually separate from this one. The fee waivers and fee reimbursements are for non-impact fees. So I don't know if that changes your feelings about them, but they're supposed to be very separate of trying to explain the difference between those fees and what can actually be done with those versus what can and cannot be done with impact fees.
Well, to answer your question, Nicole, waiver versus reimbursement. Waiver means I don't pay it. Reimbursement means I pay it, pay interest on the money while it's tied up for how long I don't know, and then later I get the reimbursement. Do I get the interest that I paid on that money? No. So it costs me more versus waiver.
And it's up to you guys. So that's why there's the two options. Is the fee waiver is that the applicant demonstrates sufficient financial need, versus the second, the reimbursement, is the applicant doesn't meet the financial hardship criteria for a waiver, but demonstrates commitment to delivering the housing units. So if you have a developer who's not financially struggling, then they could get reimbursed. If you have one that is just trying to do a small project and doing their best, so it's up to you. I can combine them all. I can do whatever you guys would like.
So putting myself in the city's shoes, if I want to help, but I want to ensure performance by the developer, I'm going to say, I'll tell you what, I'll reimburse you once you do your side of the commitment here, but I'm not going to waive up front. So I think they're giving themselves some latitude here to address individual, and it talks about case by case. So I kind of like the language being there. They can choose to either waive or reimburse, because there might be conditions that reimbursement is contingent upon substantial conformance. Is what I would say.
Randy?
Well, oh,
Hi, how are you? I'm sorry I'm late. I had another meeting. That is exactly what that, Mike is 100% correct. It was a firewall, because in the past we've had a situation like that for non-performance or a promise made and it was not kept. And I think that the council and some of the members that weighed in felt that this would be a way to ensure performance. If you perform, there's no problem. You know, we may send the money back, but we've got to be able to have that in there.
well, I get that, but wouldn't you pick that up on final or not? Why wouldn't you on final for the building not issue final if they didn't comply with the agreement?
Well, I think if they comply, I don't think there's going to be a problem to give it on final. And remember, we had a discussion, don't confuse it with the discussion we had a while back, where we would consider as a city maybe holding the payment for a while in terms of, you know, we talked a lot about maybe a city property would be used. Ultimately, the taxpayers have to be paid back, but we would delay that so long as you performed in building whatever the project was. But in this situation, the fees would be on a case-by-case basis reimbursed when the project is completed.
Well, I get it, and I agree with you. I really do, from the city's perspective. But I'm always looking at attract that builder, save money for him to make this thing financially work. And if let's say the number is $300,000, $400,000 he's got to put up front and going to be reimbursed 2 years down the road, he's got to sit there and pay the interest on that $300,000 or $400,000 with his lending bank, and that has to factor in his overall overhead costs.
Agreed.
And I'm trying to get rid of that so that,
Yeah.
may Mr. Builder come do this for us. That's all.
I can't think of a good way to, if a builder's going to cut it that short, then maybe he doesn't need to be building. Sorry.
Connie, there's no room in these projects.
I get it.
Put
I
one
know it.
together. There's no room.
Well,
These
then
things are
maybe
so skinny.
maybe there's another option. Maybe there's a bond, some kind of an assurance that you put up. Maybe we attach a lien. I mean, that's another possibility. We need our city attorney here to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, we do bonds all the time. Why wouldn't we bond it?
We can do a lien release at the end of the project. It's an option. Talk to Matt Podracki about that. We can alter this. We still have time.
I don't know. I'm the only one saying anything. Come on, guys, say something.
No, I 100% agree. We need to incent the contractors and the builders to start. And if they are bad actors, then, you know, we address that in some other fashion. And I don't have the answer to that yet, but we have smart people that can figure out the answer to that. But we have to, I mean, what is our mission? Are we trying to incent this to happen, or are we trying to protect ourselves from being legally taken advantage of? And I don't know that we can do both of those. You know, we're going to have to lean one way or the other is what I would propose.
Yeah,
to
I think you
about.
should all explore the lien option.
No, we can do both. We really can. I mean, we do it in the building industry forever. It's a bond. You know, if you post a performance bond and you don't perform, guess what happens? Then the bond company's got to pay that money, and they're coming after you, and you paid for that bond in the first place. So yeah, it's all a financial deal. But a performance bond would be an assurance that you're going to complete the work as per. I mean, he's sitting right there. Ask him, Will. He'll tell you that if you work in the public right of way, you know, sewer, water, you've got to post a bond because now you're in a city public right of way and you're cutting it open and doing things and digging and all that kind of stuff. So wouldn't this kind of fall under the same deal?
Yeah, but we're looking for options, Randy. Not all projects are going to be huge. Amber mentioned it before. What if you've got a guy that wants to do a duplex? He's not going to have the financial backing. So maybe a lien would be, I think we've got to really offer the options. So a lien might be the way to go on that. So, you know, it's just got to be well-rounded.
Every project's going to require financial assurances. That's already written in the code. But to address your concern, maybe a contingent waiver. We're going to waive, but contingent on performance. And if you keep in mind, the project's still going to move forward. The question is it workforce? Does it meet the criteria for workforce? And at the end of the day, if it fails to meet the criteria for workforce, then the fees aren't waived. I mean, the bottom line is if we don't incentivize workforce housing development and protect the city, then we're going to fail. We got to do both.
We got to do both.
So
That's right. And that's exactly what we're trying to do because ultimately it's your tax dollars we're trying to protect. We need this product. Everybody agrees. You'll get no argument from me. But we have to make sure that we offer options for well-rounded projects so it applies to everybody. It may not apply to you on that. And your idea of trying to withhold as much cash as you can for your upfront costs are legitimate. But you're in a different league. And we do have to figure out a way to handle that. But I think, the performance bond is absolutely right, providing it's the right amount. But I do think a lien option would be another way to allow somebody to spend the least amount of money up front that they can because there's already so many costs they cannot waive.
Amber, can we say all that somehow in a sentence?
I'll work with legal to find a way to put that all in there. I do have a quick question. Do we want to get rid of the sentences about the 80% AMI? Do we want that to have a factor at all? Or just as long as they are workforce housing within our percentage, then it'll only depend on their financial analysis situation? Get rid of that? Okay, that's easy.
We're not really going to know that it's workforce housing until it's completed, certificate of occupancy is issued, and they actually put it up for lease, right?
No, this is something that has to be established right from the get-go. The minute you submit, you're going to fall into the criteria of workforce housing or you're not. And there's going to be some, and I'm not clear on this myself, some certification process that you're going to have to go through to meet those goals.
But, I mean, ultimately, we won't know. I mean, we'll have to go and monitor that when they put it up for lease, that they're complying with the requirements of workforce housing, correct?
Correct.
And who is going to monitor the compliance?
Well, that's a situation that you're going to have two different types of developers in this. You're going to have the ones that are going to take advantage of the tax breaks that are offered, and they're going to have to offer this product. We talked about LIHTC is now at 30 years. I think we talked about 20 years. That's a whole different ballgame than a developer that lives here that wants to come forward and offer a workforce housing development and not take advantage of those tax breaks. Then yeah, it's going to be up to us to monitor that. And I mean, there's going to have to be some kind of an affidavit when they're submitting that they're going to agree to these requirements to fall into that workforce housing project. Affidavit, whatever we're going to come up with, we're going to have to figure that out. And there's a very good chance that ComDev has already talked about this, the certification process. Will, do you know anything about that?
It's something we've looked at with consultant, so it would be something we would look at later in this process after this is more of the workforce housing policy has been approved by council.
Right. you.
Going back to Flagstaff, Roger, they have what we don't have. They have staff that they monitor workforce, and they do that through HOA and property management. And they check in with them regularly, and they get feedback, so they know what's going on. We don't have that staff position. Maybe someday we can fund that. I don't know.
And
That's not up to me.
Speaking of Flagstaff, that was not the number one thing, but that was very high on their radar that it happened to them. They learned that the hard way. They issued some workforce housing projects that didn't actually turn out to be workforce housing projects. And so I think for the city to learn from those mistakes was wise, and trying to figure out a way to build in a firewall to keep it workforce housing. And they're learning as they're going also. Right, Amber?
Yes, and to maybe put a broader view on all of this, at that last sentence, all determinations will be made through a consistent staff review process using the above criteria. Why does that one have different information than mine? Okay, mine says, and the ones you guys have received should also say, all determinations will be made through a consistent staff review process using uniform criteria, and recommendations will be presented to the city council for approval on a case-by-case basis. So, and I don't know why that one doesn't say that. But the good thing about that, if it goes, because ultimately it would be great if we had hundreds of workforce housing projects coming a year. Chances are, especially as it goes, we probably won't have an overwhelming amount. We might have a few a year, maybe 10 a year. I don't know. We won't know until we get going. But for the reimbursements and the waivers, at this point, it would have to have council approval. So they can have that discussion with council of, well, we want to get reimbursed, but we want to ensure that we're reimbursed for all of the interest as well, or we want to do a bond, and then it'll be up to council if they even want to get more flexible than that. Again, I apologize. I don't know why this one doesn't have that full sentence, because I kind of like that sentence, because it does make it to where it has to get approved by council to reimburse or waive after they have proven that they meet all the criteria. And then council could go with, hi, we can't do this way, but we'd like to do it a bond way as well. But I will talk to legal about finding a way to put in liens and bonds in there as well as options, so they have the full scope.
Amber, comment, and it really was when we get to parking, but the case-by-case thing, I get it, because it's all new. Connie, I guess I'm addressing this to you. It's all new for all of us, and so it's a little scary, you know? But remember, part of our incentive was to eliminate the time factor. And when I hear case-by-case by council, that adds time, so that concerns me. And I think what I'm just saying, I'm not proposing anything here, but what I'm saying is I think over time we'll learn what works and doesn't, and we can then start to expedite more and less council approval, because we'll all learn and get more comfortable. So I get where we are now, but remember that every time we put that in, that adds time to the development approval, which is counterproductive to what we all agreed was important.
Well, behind the scenes, we're dealing with some things that just came down, a House bill or a Senate bill that we now are going to be, I think it goes into effect January 1st, 2026, if I'm not mistaken. And community development is gearing up for that. They're going to have 15 days to turn these reviews around. So the option is to go out. We're going to have to go out at some point, depending upon the volume that we have and the expertise of the project. So that they are going to be, this is going to be a learning curve this next year on how we're going to be able to do that. Agreed. And remember, even if the community development makes a promise, and you know this, I'm sure you do too, Mike Fan, to be able to expedite this thing, if you get your first set of red lines and you've got to go back to your engineer, you're going to get into probably a multi-month wait on there. So that's going to negate all the promises, because we can't control what your engineer, what his schedule is. So there's a lot of promises being made that are not going to be able to be kept. So be realistic about it, and you've done enough projects to know that. Those are things that are completely out of our control. So the heart may be there to get it out, but it's really going to depend on, what happens during red lines. Hey, and one other thing I wanted to, Randy, give you, let me create this scenario because this is something I've given a lot of thought to since we live in the United States of America, we have a constitution and we have property rights. Think about this scenario. You can have, Joe come up with a bunch of plans, maybe a 10-plex or whatever. This is going to be workforce housing. I'm going to make these promises. I'm going to have a performance bond. He gets everything done, gets it out there. We give him, waiver on development fees or whatever it is. And then 2 years down the road, it's his property. He decides he doesn't want to be part of that anymore. What are we as a city? I mean, we can't have a grant assurance. I mean, what do you propose to try to control that situation? Because he does own it, and maybe it's not working out for workforce housing. He owns that property, has the right to do with it what he wants. So how do we control that scenario? That's one I've thought a lot about, because it'd be great to be able to get all these fees reimbursed and say you're going to do it, but then what happens after a couple of years when we have no strings attached to it? Not that we should, but those are options that we've got to think about. So come up with a good one on that. I can't hear you.
Business license.
Yeah, I tried that and it got shot down.
Oh, yeah.
We do need that. We need that not for the stakeholders. And I said this before, we need it for the consumer. The consumer needs to be involved in that because that's the only recourse they have. And that's a keep that valid point, because I think it is a time for us to be able to have a business license of some sort. We've got, some bad actors and we have no way to be able to do anything. The person that's had the problem with the business maybe over and over again, and I know one right now, this poor lady's complained to me many, many times. We can't do anything about it. She has to go get a lawyer and sue that company civilly because we have no teeth to be able to go after that company.
Well, let's back up for a minute. Take my project. If I advertise as workforce affordable and I let people move in and they were paying workforce prices, and in 2 years I decided I didn't want to do anymore and now I'm going to market, what happens to those people? So business license is conditional use. It's issued under that. If I'm in violation of my business license, then my property can be red tagged. Now, it's not good for the occupants because they're all going to get the boot, but it's not good for the property owner either because you're going to have one big vacant project. So business license.
Well, you can help me out on that. But we actually have that situation going on right now with the Bradshaw Senior Living and also Canyon Run. They have fulfilled their promise. They did take some grant money. So he's allowed to do that. But I don't know if you were watching two councils ago, we had several women that had lived in those places for quite some time and they were being evicted. They just simply couldn't afford it anymore. But the new owner was well within his rights to do that. It's a tough situation.
So Connie,
and back to staying in our lane. It's at some point the city's got to say that's not our job.
And that was the tough thing to do that day because we couldn't, as you know, we couldn't respond.
Right. Enforcement is going to be part of this at some point. Once this is implemented, it has to be enforced. And if they get waivers and then don't deliver workforce housing and maintain workforce housing, then there has to be an enforcement issue. And I think business license is probably not probably does not have enough teeth in it. Because I can form an LLC, get a business license under that LLC, and when I'm done with my project, I can get rid of the LLC, and it doesn't affect me at all. So there's all kinds of ways around that. Having some sort of assurance, I don't know if a lien is the right answer, but something, city's going to have some enforcement teeth if they're going to offer waivers.
And I think the only thing that we're going to be able to do is something similar to a grant assurance and have it spelled out inside that contract that'll have to be signed that if you, before X date, and we're going to try to follow LIHTC 30 years, if you decide to reverse this, then this is what you have to do. You're going to have to pay back those grant monies, the taxpayer funds, with interest.
Agreed.
Okay.
Not to
I think we need to
continue this,
get
I know we're a little off course here, but I'm asking you, Mike, what about the lender, the project lender, the financial institute that lended for that project? Is there dialogue in that can be attached, that then they could call that note on that developer if he doesn't stay in the lane?
Now you just open up another issue. The lender is not going to be subordinate to the returning of fees. So now that is a whole other issue. You might have a problem with your financing if you're not careful on how you write any reimbursement if you don't deliver what you say you're going to deliver. These are not easy issues. I don't have the answer as we sit here right now. But when it comes to enforcement, we're going to have to address enforcement fairly soon.
How about if we get Joe Young on our agenda and you guys write those questions down, and let's address Joe Young. We'll give him a little bit of time to do some research. Is that okay, Amber? Try to have Joe, maybe, I don't know what the timing is on the next one, if he'll have time to look into it, but let's put that on his plate and then get him here as a guest, and he can answer all these questions. Those are all legitimate questions because we want to protect the taxpayer, but we also want to protect the workforce housing inhabitants, if you will.
I can always ask, yeah.
Yeah, see if he can come, because I think it'd be great open dialogue for everybody in the board here to be able to speak to Joe. But let's give him a little bit of time to do a little more research into the topic.
Yeah, I agree. And the lender, protect the lender too, just what Mike was just saying. There's an answer for all this, you guys. We just got to put the right minds in the right room and we'll come up with it. I no doubt in my mind we can.
Yeah, I think so too.
And we'll learn as we go. If we made a mistake and somebody circumvents, because that's what people do, we'll figure it out and we'll fix it and we'll go on.
Yep, sounds like a plan.
IT, if you'll scroll down to the developer impact fees section, perfect. And this actually continues on another page too, but this was to hopefully clear up what exactly development impact fees are, why they are what they are, and that if they were to be paid by the city, it would be using taxpayer funds. So council members were very clear. They want it very clearly spelled out. It's not the city just paying it, it's city paying it using the taxpayer funds. And then any determination must meet the following transparent criteria to ensure equal treatment for all developers. Formal evaluation has been conducted. Financial analysis demonstrates that without the participation, the project would not be feasible or would provide significantly fewer workforce housing units. The project aligns with the council adopted workforce housing program goals and strategic plan priorities. And then IT, if you'll go to the next page. The approval is applied consistently to all similar situated applicants and must be given by council. And then deferral of impact fees or for market rate units, if they are asking for that as well. The deferral is authorized within council approved development agreements, ARSs. So this was legalese a bit. But through this approach, the city of Prescott seeks to encourage the development of workforce housing while maintaining financial responsibility, transparency, and fairness to all developers, taxpayers, and residents. I am happy to say I didn't write most of that one.
Can I break rank here for a second? Our next meeting is September 3rd. Will, can I ask that impact fees be put on that agenda, do you think? Is that reasonable?
Probably a little bit early to get research done and the answers. Probably more realistic for October.
And the nice thing with the policy is it is to give staff direction of what to do. So it's one of those that if council agrees that even discussing impact fees being paid by the city, then legal and staff would work heavily to see how we legally do that as well. So a lot of that's going to be heavy on staff side to make sure that we follow all of the state rules, all of the state laws, and our city codes as well. So the policy gives good direction to staff if council approves it, that is something they want staff to work towards for appropriate projects. They would come back to council. They have to come back to council for actual approval, but there'd be a lot of staff work on that of exactly how we do that.
Here's an idea. Again, I've been discussing this with a young builder who's interested in, and I have read this thing 20 times. What about this? I'm just going to throw it out there. What if we take the impact fee waiver completely out of this policy? It's just gone. Every developer has to pay impact fees. But what we can do in like kind, and this may take care of the assurance, is we can grant whatever the developer comes forward and his development or his impact fees would be, that would be the amount that we would grant to him. So the impact fees, we're going to follow the law, they're going to be paid by the developer, and then we will turn this around and reimburse the developer by way of a grant, with a grant assurance. Think about it.
So that's a great question for legal, because they'll let us know if we can legally do that too. 'Cause
Right.
It's still kind of tied in together. So we can talk about that at the next meeting when Joe comes.
And if it's a really great project, by the way, Randy, and the council thinks that this is, they're on board with it, they may even consider granting more out of, the general fund because it's going to be worth it. So that might be just another option, because I know the impact fee is it's a hot topic for a lot of people. And then we can develop whatever the impact fees that would be normally paid. That can be established by ComDev. That we could start out with a grant process that equals that, and then maybe more. I mean, it depends on how the project is sold. So that kind of takes us away from the waiver of fees altogether.
Well, you guys, when I first got on this committee, we talked about impact fees, and it was like kryptonite. We were supposed to stay away from it, not even really kind of talk about it almost. And I didn't really understand where that money went. And I'm sort of jumping ahead here a little bit, and Will's probably going to scold me, but that money comes back to the city. So if somebody pays impact fees, I thought maybe the state took a big chunk or whatever the deal is, and my understanding is that's not true. It actually comes back to the city. So if the city paid an impact fee, it comes right back. Your pot doesn't grow, but your pot doesn't shrink.
But you have to remember, we don't have a pot. And that's the whole point for implementing the impact fees. We just had an 80% rise because since 2019, there were relatively no impact fees. There were some, but there was zero for police and fire. That's how we found ourselves in the situation with $133 million behind the 8 ball on that alone. So we had very small impact fees, and they were spent on something else. So that infrastructure was passed on to the taxpayer because the development impact fees were not there. We hired a company that does this every single day to come in and do an evaluation, and they were the ones that established the 80% rise in impact fees in order for growth to pay for growth. So they have to be paid one way or the other.
Well,
I think there's maybe $3 million right now in our impact fee fund.
Well, let's put a pin in impact fees for now, just because it is one we really need to have the lawyers in the room for us to have constructive dialogue, just because I can guarantee I don't know enough to even have constructive conversation. So we'll work on getting legal here for the next one so that we can really dive into that one a bit more. But if you're okay with it, we'll put a pin in that one for right now, just because I don't know if we can I don't know the numbers or anything like that.
Well, and think about putting something in this policy that it does address a grant of some sort. Just, again, another option.
Pin has stuck. Okay. But yes, we will bring back legal so we can have a really good conversation of what we can actually do with those, because I know for my level of staff, they are kryptonite. I don't touch those. It's a legal thing. So we'll bring them in so they can talk about them. So the red areas after this section are just kind of the muddled previous one that we had before that put all the fees kind of together. So IT, if you'll scroll and keep scrolling. So, and then it kind of talked about the different programs. So that was all just cleared out in the previous one. They can't have outstanding debts. They have to be in good standing with the city. So that's all part of the workforce housing certification as well. So IT, if you'll go to the next one. And then this is where we kind of got rid of that chart and just put it to percentage for percentage that we said earlier. And then fees were broken out separately earlier as well. So if IT, you'll keep scrolling just to make sure. And okay, so prioritization and expedited review. That's just a little intro sentence. IT, if you'll go to the next page. So this is where we kind of changed it quite a bit because the state did pass a law that said for single family residence buildings, the reviews have to be done within 15 days. The legalese is up there if you want to read it, but that kind of already expedited it quite a bit. So we can still commit to further prioritizing them and assigning them priority scheduling. But now we are restricted by state that certain projects have to be reviewed within 15 days, which already expedites it quite a bit more than it was before, from my understanding. So we still will do our best to make sure that we give them as much priority as we can, still using that tight time frame. IT, if you'll scroll down a little bit.
Amber, can I just make one
Yeah.
request? I know we talked about this like many, many months ago, but that leader paragraph under section 2B, can we just eliminate essential workers and just say the workforce?
Yeah, that's not a problem. Nope. Okay. I'll go through and make sure that essential, because I know that was a topic earlier in the conversation. I'll go through and make sure that essential workers isn't in there, but that workforce is what's in there for that. So all of this is just kind of aligning it with the new state law while still saying we're going to do everything we can to prioritize them to the best of our ability with the staff that we have to make it happen. And then IT, if you'll keep going down and to the next page. Perfect. Oh, wait, one. Perfect. So there are different types of housing projects. So for eligible projects, city staff and the applicant will establish a coordinated review schedule at project intake. That way everybody is being held accountable on the city side, on the developer side. And then the model plan model site process, where applicable, the city encourages the use of a model plan process to streamline reviews. So it allows developers to submit one model plan that will be applied to multiple or similar sites. And then staff will conduct a single consolidated review, issue unified comments, and apply those comments to the model plan. And once approved, the model plan can be applied to various sites. So if they're doing very similar style houses, they can get one site plan approved and be able to use that. So that'll help expedite different things as well. So it reduces repetitive reviews, increases consistency, and significantly shortens the total review time, hopefully. Does anybody have any questions on that part? So it hasn't changed much. It's just that we have the new law to comply with and go from there. IT, if you'll go to next page. So this is for the requirements and criteria for expedited review. So the shared responsibility, staff works really hard to try to be as quick and efficient with reviews as possible. I know we've had those conversations before where city finishes their review in a certain time frame, the engineer gets it, and they end up taking 3 months or something like that. So this just holds everyone accountable that we're working together to get this through as efficiently and correctly as possible. So that hasn't changed. Requirements for expedited review, it kind of got addressed in the previous area with the new law and addressing that. Compliance with building codes. So a copy of the workforce housing certification must accompany each permit, and documents and applications can be retrieved from the City of Prescott Community Development front counter. So they have to comply with building codes, which is normal. If you'll scroll down, IT, make sure there's nothing else on that page. Oh, there is. So new closing paragraph. Through the Workforce Housing Expedited Review Program, the City of Prescott supports the timely development of workforce housing while fully complying with Arizona state law, maintaining fairness for all applicants, and advancing city goals to provide attainable housing options for essential community members. I'll take out essential. The combination of state mandated timelines, internal prioritization, and process efficiencies such as model plans. I had it as block submissions. Apparently, we actually call those model plans. Ensure consistent, predictable, and transparent review process for all workforce housing developments. So, does anybody have any questions on that section? Okay. IT, if you'll go to the next page. So we just added in zoning code requirements just because that's what these are. So just adding that word into the intro. Density bonuses, I know we talked about that in the past. The city may allow increased residential density for workforce housing projects that provide additional public benefits. Developers may qualify for density bonuses by incorporating features such as additional open space, public parks, recreational amenities, enhanced landscaping or buffering, additional parking, or the preservation of existing historical structures. The amount of density bonus granted will be based on the type and level of public benefit provided, ensuring consistency and compatibility with surrounding neighborhoods. So there will be, if that gets your go ahead and council's approval, that'll be another area that we will probably work on and we will work on an internal process for determining, okay, if they are giving us this amount of public park, we can do this. So that's giving direction to staff that those discussions can take place. Do you guys have
Amber,
any? Yes.
for the life of me, I don't know how this is ever going to work. This is like a fairy tale. You can't have density increase and have open space and parking and public. I mean, it sounds real nice, but it's unattainable. It's ridiculous. We have to decide what's going to be important to us. And I realize they want to do it on a case-by-case basis, but the question that comes to my mind, Connie, I'll direct this toward you, is when we do a study of one case-by-case and we learn something, why can't we take what we learned and create it into a streamlined document that says, do this, and we'll approve you? But all this other stuff about additional parking, forget it. It's not going to work.
Well, I think that's why they put case by case in there, because it's really going to depend on where you do this. I mean, if you're in a brand new area with a planned area development, your flexibility is much greater than if you move right downtown here and you plop a 4-story building inside of a historic neighborhood. You've got to offer some options. You can ask for a waiver on the requirement for open space. I think that needs to be listed in here. Those are the things that you can ask. It makes sense to me. The parking, I think it has to be addressed. It really does. You saw what happened with the marina apartments there. Downtown area, we are at a lack of parking, and it would be political suicide to offer a 200-unit workforce housing with no parking requirement. It's just not going to happen. So don't sabotage yourself, right?
Well, no, I don't think no parking requirement. I'm sorry I stepped on you, but I also think that what is it, 2.5 per unit now for apartment? That we need to
2.5 or just 2?
No, I thought it was 2.5. It was
Okay.
a while ago. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it changed. But I mean, the point is, how do we maintain that and yet create more density on the same piece of property? I don't know.
I know. It's a tough one. We need another city parking garage. Why don't you help me on that? And we'll put it right close to your property. No, I'm kidding.
So this is one where if the committee would like to stick with the original verbiage, we can absolutely do that, and it can be a discussion with council. So that was just input provided by council. If the committee wants to go with the original, if you want to find a hybrid of both, then we can do that as well. And then that can be a further discussion with council.
I guess either way, it's vague and it leaves a lot of room for being subjective, which I understand because this is uncharted territory for us. So perhaps as we get into this and we have a case by case project, kind of like what Randy was saying, we can really fine tune some of these things and have a clearer path to what a density bonus could look like. If X, then Y.
Look, as we're walking all the way through this, there is an underlying theme that I'm starting to get concerned about, and that is we're establishing a policy. But to Randy's point, so much of this is council approval, and the further we go down that road, the slower the process gets, and the less this document means, because staff should follow policy. But if the policy is defer to council, I am concerned there's an underlying theme here that's gonna drive away people from pursuing workforce housing in the city of Prescott. So I do think some of this needs some work regarding here's the policy, and if you want to change policy, you have to go to council. That makes sense. But to have a policy that requires you to go to council, I think that's problematic.
Can I respond to that? What if we placed a unit amount on that? I mean, again, if you've got Joe that comes forward with a duplex, that probably doesn't require council approval. If you have a 200-unit single-family home development, that probably would. And think about it. Common sense says, and Randy, you know this, if the city is willing to give a density bonus, how are they going to achieve that? They're going to have to give a waiver on the 25% open space and maybe cut down or make a common area for parking. I don't know. I mean, that'll have to be done creatively, but it's going to really have to depend on your project location.
Well, to my fellow members, I don't like kicking things down the road. I'm a kind of a get things done guy. These guys know that about me. But I think on this one, we might want to defer to next meeting because I really want to think about this. I really want to come up with some creative out of the box thinking, and I can't do it in the next 40 minutes sitting right here. This is going to take some time. I really don't want to kick it down the road, but I'd like to suggest that maybe we do. That gives us a month to think it over, make some notes, and actually roll up our sleeves and do a little homework as a committee member, not just show up once a month and think about stuff. I actually come up with some ideas and pitch them. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I do think density bonus is a very valuable tool that can actually help a project to pencil. So I think it does, it warrants some very thoughtful consideration. And I feel like we talked about this before, Amber, but I know we looked at some different models. Did we ever have somebody who could maybe present to us about what was working well from a density bonus standpoint? Did that ever come to fruition? And if not, maybe that's something we could look at.
I'll have to go back and look because I can't remember. I know we talked about it, but I can't actually remember. So I'll go look. But we can discuss it at the next one and see if we can bring some examples and things like that.
I can't even think of an example so far that we've done that on. We've lowered the setback requirement to 5 feet for some of the newer developments out in Deepwell Ranch, but in terms of a density bonus, maybe the one on Willow Creek Road. What about that one at the roundabout? Was that a Lafferty project?
If I'm remembering, I was gonna say, if I'm remembering correctly, we did reach out to Flagstaff. I'll have to check, but I believe that they sent some things that they had seen and that we sent it on, but I'll double check that and I'll resend it if that's the case.
When I teleconferenced with Flag, they mentioned it, but they kind of blew past it and I didn't get back to it. So we really, not that they're the ultimate answer. I know I keep saying Flagstaff, but they have been at it for a while and they've made some mistakes and they've learned from it. So maybe another reach out, Amber, and if you want me to do it or however you want to do it, but Yeah, so let's talk to them about that, because she did bring it up, and I did talk to her briefly, but very briefly, and I'd like to know more.
And you may want to consider doing 2 separate paragraphs too. Do something that you address the larger developments, and do something completely different when you address the smaller developments based on the amount of units. I know it's a little more complicated, but they're apples and oranges. You're going to have to be able to treat that differently.
I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how many paragraphs, because this is an important element. Whether it's a duplex, like you just said, or 200 units, this is an important element for the developer, because this, Mike, you know as well as I do, this is what makes or breaks a deal.
Right, I agree.
If it doesn't pencil, because you don't have enough units in there, you don't do it, period.
Well, explore your options, because right now you have an opportunity to offer those options. This is the time to do it.
Amber, I just did a quick AI search, and it says that the city of Austin is currently revisiting their program. They've been, I guess, doing it for a while, but they're wanting to make it more flexible and better tailored to promote real attainability and community benefits across neighborhoods. So maybe that's one we could look at.
Yeah, not a problem. So we'll come back to density bonus. That's easy. Fees and waivers and reductions, an expedited review process were previously discussed. IT, if you'll scroll down just a little bit. So the reduced parking requirements were generally not supported by anyone I spoke with. And there was some opportunity, though, from some of the members I spoke to, that they would consider reductions on a case-by-case basis if a formal neighborhood level parking analysis demonstrates that the reduction is appropriate. So it would be a neighborhood specific discussion where if it is right downtown, it might not be feasible because of where it is. But if it is up in the north and there's different transit or things like that. So generally not supported, but a couple of them were open to discussing it on a case-by-case basis as long as there was some sort of formal analysis done, saying that it wouldn't disrupt the neighborhood and affect the current neighborhood.
I know I'm talking too much here today, I'm sorry, but this is what I was mentioning earlier. If we do a case-by-case to learn, and we do the formal analysis, then why can't we take the information we learned and put it into a policy? I mean, that's my thinking. Yeah, we learn on the first few, and then once we learn, why keep doing that over and over? No. Take the stuff we learned, put it into a policy, and now here it is. If you're downtown this, if you're out north, it's this. I don't know.
I can work on verbiage to put that in there some way. And then IT, if you'll scroll down, I think it should be on the same page. Yes, so heightened setback flexibility. The city, through approval by city council, may grant zoning code concessions, technical terms, for building height and setbacks for workforce housing projects in certain areas, particularly in mixed use or infill development zones. This flexibility will maximize the use of land while maintaining appropriate buffers and respecting neighborhood contexts.
It is a waiver of existing ordinance, so I think it does have to go to council. Back to the same thing. I think if we establish a policy that can be followed by staff, but as soon as you're going to vary from a city ordinance, rules, regulations, policies, I do think it's got to go to council at that point.
Well, let me ask, who, I don't know who should answer this, but if we say go to council, how long does that take exactly? What does it take to go to council?
Our city clerk makes that decision. So we have an agenda, or we have a program, I guess you want to call it, and then she will try to fit in where she can. I mean, it depends on what's in front of us and the priority. And she'll be able to get it on when she can fit it in. Because there's only so many hours in the day. We were there till 8:30 one night, not too long ago. It depends on our packet. It depends on what's in front of us. But that's something that she can maybe expedite, but something else is going to have to be removed off of the agenda in some cases, not always.
So if this is indeed a high-level priority for the city right now, and I know that's part of the goals, could that be the policy language that anything that requires council intervention as it relates to workforce housing is immediately prioritized for the following council meeting? And then we're not stuck in this loop of waiting on council, waiting on council.
That's a touchy one. I think Sarah would probably be best. It just depends, because a lot of times we have time limitations on things that are on the agenda, contracts that we have to fulfill, 30-day review periods, whatever it is. It just depends. And we've had, like I said, we've had some really loaded up agendas that we've been here. My packet 2 council meetings ago was 1,018 pages, mostly of contracts. So I think if she can fit it in, I think it's possible. But I don't know about whether she'll be happy that we mandate that, because there's a lot of things, again, that we have to have on there.
So-
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Another question, does it have to go to open council meeting for approval, or can it be done in a study session with council, these kind of things?
No, it's got to go. It's got to be on the voting session, not the study session.
So I can work with Sarah on some verbiage and see what her comfort levels are with that. I know generally if there's a majority of council who says that we are going to do something, then we do it. So, but I'll talk with her and see what pros and cons there are to that, what verbiage needs to happen, things like that. And we can come back with something in an intro paragraph in the beginning of the policy about that.
Thanks, Amber.
All right. IT, if you'll go down. Or next page, yeah. Let's see, where'd we go? So the determination process, the community development director or designee will review requests for code concessions based on eligibility, such as the workforce housing certification, project design, public benefit, and a standardized review framework will be created to guide these determinations and ensure fairness and consistency. Any request will be reviewed and then forwarded to City Council for final consideration. So we do plan on having a staff process that'll hopefully create a very simple, clear topic of discussion to send to council, so it looks the same every time.
But Amber, that's a perfect location if you were to come up with a sliding scale. Again, a duplex probably doesn't need to go in front of council. A big 200-unit planned area development probably should. So you guys should probably figure that out. I mean, what's the minimum that you could circumvent council?
So I know one topic that came up with a lot of the council members was consistency for every developer. So it wasn't and it's up to the committee. I'll put in whatever you want, but it was talked more that every developer was treated the same regardless of anything else. So I don't know if that impacts that.
That implies to me, though, that all developers are treated the same in terms of the building codes, the setback requirements. The review process is what I'm talking about. If you have a fourplex that comes in front of us, presumably they've already, gotten some allowances. The review is the part. Do they now need to go back as a fourplex to get in front of council? I don't think that's necessary. If the impact is low, a giant pad is a whole different story. I don't know. What do you think, Randy? Mike?
Well, I think back to my comment. So what we're talking about right now is zoning code changes. So zoning code changes, I would suspect by Arizona revised statute, has to go to council. And we don't want to put staff in a position to make those decisions anyway. Here's policy. If you deviate from policy or deviate from a code or a regulation, you have to go to council. You can't ask staff to make those decisions. You put them in a very, very uncomfortable position to do that. So I do think I think those things have to go to council. But the rest of these review processes and things that can handle administratively, that's what we're doing here, is my thinking. We establish a policy that staff can follow,
I agree.
and the builder or developer or whoever can count on.
Well, presumably, if we have the policy, the guy doing the fourplex has already taken advantage of what the policy is. But then does it need on a fourplex to go through council?
I would say no, other than the normal process that goes through council now.
Right.
I would say those things should all be handled administratively by staff, as long as they have clear guidance.
I agree with that. But then, again, my question is, does it have to go in front of council?
No, other than not the workforce housing piece of it.
Right.
But everything else still has to go to council that would normally have to go to council if they're asking for a deviation. So I would say only if they would have to anyway.
But see, it doesn't say that. It says the community development director or designee will review the request for code concessions based on eligibility such as workforce housing certification, project design, public benefit. A standardized review framework will be created to guide these determinations and ensure fairness and consistency. Now, any requests will be reviewed and then forwarded to the city council. Do you want to put in there any requests above 10 units? I mean, is that
No.
important to anybody?
I don't know what to do here, Connie, because
Okay.
it goes back to density. If a fourplex affects density, then we're back to that issue again.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter if it's a 4 or 400, it affects density and parking
Yeah.
is density.
Right.
Hey, I don't know. I need some time to rattle this around in my pea brain and see if I can come up with something.
But keep in mind, we're under the heading Section 2C, and what she just read was the end of modification of zoning code requirements. I mean, we can talk to the city attorney, but my guess is a zoning code modification requires council approval.
Correct. Per Chelsea and legal, when they both went through this, Chelsea said she didn't have the authority to approve these. They would have to go to council, this section.
Okay.
And same with impact fees. So this section and impact fees, but there are a couple other areas that were requested to be by council approval or on a case-by-case basis that we can work on that. But yes, so for this one, Chelsea and legal both said that these really they need to go to council.
So then we're establishing a policy that is still ultimately going to need to be reviewed through council, even though
Just parts of it.
most of them will be taking advantage of some of these concessions.
Like this part goes into the zoning code and the land development code, so those have to go through council because of other state laws and other processes and procedures. So the policy as a whole doesn't have every step that has to go to council, but there are certain chunks like impact fees and this one that they do.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
We're putting a lot of emphasis on the community development. How big a department is that?
So if council approves this policy, then the community development department will have to assess their staffing levels, what will be required of them, and then council will start seeing in the next budget session requests for different positions to help fulfill these things. So I would say right now, they probably aren't big enough because they've never had to have the staffing for this level of things. They definitely have some staffing that does some of the aspects, but I imagine they will need to add staffing for this, and that'll come up through the budget discussions if this is approved through council. And then that sentence, the below are strategies for the city to review and further study to determine feasibility, that was a legal inputted sentence. Other than the parking being removed, that was requested by different council members. But yeah, that sentence, the city attorney said that it'd be best if we put those as strategies for us to review, and then staff can look into implementing, rather than saying the city will do all of those in case we come up against something that we can't. So he said strategies is the best way to phrase that. And I make it a point to not argue with lawyers. So if if we could scroll down. Scroll down. And we did end up, so if you'll scroll or go to the next page, we took a lot of the above and kind of put it into by promoting voluntary workforce inclusion instead of making it its own section, because a lot of it has to be voluntary. We can't force anybody to do workforce housing inclusion. So we just kind of cleaned that up, and then the project qualifications were listed above and will be part of the workforce housing certification. So that was just cleaning up that section a little bit. The water policy is similar to where all workforce housing incentives related to water will be addressed in the city's water policy. So it has some concepts in there that they can do, but any workforce housing related to water will need to be actually put into the water policy, not in the workforce housing policy. Any questions, comments on that one? And we do still have our water team working on what that could look like for the water policy as well. So, but we wanted to keep this generic as the details would be in that policy of any water related incentives. All right. If we could go to the next page. So that was just cleaning up all of that. And then scroll down. Employee incentives haven't been changed much. Keep going. And then next page, if you would. So the only thing that we put into the employee incentives will be that the city will actively pursue grants, external funding sources, and regional partnerships to support workforce housing efforts. Any external funds received may be applied to a centralized workforce housing fund, which we already established, and can be used to benefit all departments and maximize resources while promoting long-term program sustainability. So just saying that staff will continue to look for financial support as well. And then the next section, home of my own, we just cleaned that up quite a bit to make it much shorter, saying we're borrowing the counties, but we also, if you go to the next page, IT, keep going. Okay, so the city will adopt the Home of My Own program that has the pre-approved plans, but that the city also may curate its own set of housing designs in the future to address specific local needs or design preferences. So it leaves us a little bit of flexibility that if we want to create our own, we can add those to the mix. So this part is a new state law as well, which I'm not overly well versed on this one, but per the state Senate bill, the city will comply with the statutory requirement to develop 3 different square footage options of standard or, so it's supporting honestly the Home of My Own program, saying that we have to have at least 3 different options. So yeah, so that's just kind of a win all the way around on that one. Can we go to the next page?
Who's going to design that?
So we're going to start off with having the county's Home of My Own ones. So we signed a memorandum of understanding that they're sharing their plans with us. It sounds like they fit into everything we already need. So we already have, and I think they have 6 plans. So we already meet that state requirement of having 3, and then we can add to them if we choose to. And I don't know the full process of who would design more of those, but right now we'll be using the counties. So. And then for revitalization, infill and expanded footprint, there was a recommendation to put in that the city's committed to promoting revitalization and infill development as a strategy to expand workforce housing while maximizing the use of existing infrastructure by encouraging redevelopment of underutilized properties and supporting strategic higher density development. The city aims to provide housing near jobs, services, and transportation while maintaining the character and functionality of existing neighborhoods. So, and then the May, or wills were turned into May, that we may prioritize, and those were legal Mays.
Yeah, and while I appreciate legal and understand what they're doing to protect the city, this is also a policy decision of mayor and council. So the more mays versus wills put in, the more you chase away somebody that would otherwise be investing to meet these goals that we're trying to achieve. So my request would be leave the wills in there because I don't think they put a big liability on the city other than saying we're committed to doing this. Just my thoughts.
I don't disagree with what Mike said. I get it, why legal said that, they don't want to box themselves into a corner. But at the same time, as a developer standing at the outside at the counter, I want to know that you will prioritize me because I'm going to do workforce, period. To say a little more about that, you have to budget your time, right? You have to set your time agenda for a project. And when it says may, how do I do that? If it says will, then I can do it. And I can prioritize my time and set my agenda for my project, and I know I'll be out of plan check by approximately. When it says may, it could be next May.
So I can definitely put in will, but I don't know, and Mayor Pro Tem can probably speak to that. I don't know if legal would give council recommendation to approve one that isn't fully protecting the city. Because ultimately is a city policy, so protecting the city is going to be priority, but I'm happy to put in whatever I'm told to put in.
I think you're exactly right. Lawyers don't like that word will. They want to have option. But think about it, Randy, if you come forward with a plan that meets all of this, I don't think there's a problem. The may is more attached to the may on a case-by-case basis. If the project doesn't meet the requirements, it doesn't. No matter what you do isn't going to make it meet it. So I think that is just a way for the city to be able to judge each project that comes in front of us. I know. Better go to law school, Randy.
I know, I don't want to, no way. I hire those guys. But at the same time, our goal was to expedite, and we've talked about this a lot, and now are we getting caught in the weeds a little bit, Mike, you think?
I mean, when I say the word may, it might as well say may or may not. Same means the same thing. So it.
That's exactly what it was intended to do.
Right.
Because if you're going to come with half the project and expect full reimbursement, it's not going to happen. There's got to be some leeway in there. If you come forward with an honest project, I don't see a problem. And remember,
it has to meet all of this criteria. So if they meet all of this criteria, then as a city, we're going to say, we will, if you meet all this criteria, we will do this.
Yeah.
If you don't meet it, we won't. But to say we may or may not, I think we are moving away from the goal that we're trying to achieve when we start adding language like that.
well, put that on your questions for Joe Young.
I agree with what Mike just said, because the protection, you said, well, if he wants all the exclusions, but he only does half the project. No, he doesn't qualify. That's the whole idea behind this policy, is we're percentaging it. In order to qualify for all the exclusions, you got to do this much. So may is like, I agree with what you're saying. It's may not, and may next year, or may 6 months.
I know, but I think you're getting caught up in the rhetoric. If the project is an honest project and you come forward with it, the commitment is there from the city. It's already, I mean, and don't forget about that Senate Bill 1353, where you've got the 15-day turnaround. Now, if you're talking about a project that wants to come forward and is only halfway compliant, then what do? We've got to leave the city a way out.
But, sorry. So if you read, here's the language. If the redevelopment of blighted or distressed property will be eligible for financial insurance, will be eligible. Doesn't say will give financial insurance.
Right.
It says it'll be eligible. The next one, will be eligible for flexible zoning. So there's very little commitment here other than if you do what you say you're going to do, developer, we'll do what we say we're going to do. That's what the will is. And so to have we may or may, if you do all these things, we may or may not do what we say we're going to do.
But don't you think there's so many things that have to fall in place? I mean, there's so many unknowns. You know, I mean, I don't know. It's a situation where all the ducks have to be in a row. But if they don't, they don't. I don't know how to change that, but
Yeah, I think your prior comment is right. If Joe's going to come visit us,
yeah.
and we should talk to Joe about this. I said, what is legal's concern? Because I don't think it says we will do anything other than we'll do what we say we're going to do if you do what you say you're going to do. So,
Yeah, exactly.
I get it.
Well, ask him, see what he says.
I think it all starts with what you got to propose a set of plans to us, us being the city, right? I've got to submit plans to you of what I propose to do, and if those plans don't meet the criteria, then they don't, and we're not going to grant. But if it does meet the criteria and it still says may, and I know we're splitting hairs a little bit, but this is a big deal, you guys. I'm saying this to the other board members. We can't just gloss over this stuff.
No,
This
but
is
do you
a
think
pretty
that
big
there's not
deal.
going to be a developer or a designer that's going to come in front with a packet that's not fully compliant? Of course they will. It's going to really depend on the piece of land they have, the size of it, what they're asking for. If, let's say, they come and 90% of it complies, but 10% doesn't, that would be up to the council to say, you know what, this project is good enough, we're going to go ahead and let them get by, or not have to comply with that, whatever it is, hypothetical 10% of the project. So, they may, based on the criteria and how the developer or the builder meets that criteria. And when we're dealing with that with a hotel right now, they're 90% in compliant. Nobody decided to go forward with that. So what I'm saying, when you say may, you're looking at the negativity of that word may. Let's look at the positive side of that. Again, developer comes forward with a fabulous project, but they don't quite meet the criteria. We may go ahead and approve it based on that.
Well, wouldn't that fall under a variance of some kind to approve something?
I don't
that
know.
doesn't?
I don't have a crystal ball.
I'm trying to write a policy so that I can give staff the teeth to say, hey, you're 90% there, but you're 10% lacking, so no, we're not going to approve it.
Yeah, but that
It
wouldn't
just
be the
clean up
staff's
the
call.
10%.
That would be the council's ultimate call.
Yeah, but if it's in policy, it would be the staff's call. Go fix it 10% and come back, and then we got something. I don't
Yeah, that could be the route. Again, it depends on the size of the project.
Can I interrupt for a quick minute? I know we're getting close on time, and I don't know how much we have left for other agenda items and staff updates. Amber, how much time do you need?
I think this would actually be a really good stopping point, just because it's kind of at the end of a section. Legal can come through and talk about what we've talked about so far, and then we can also continue from there. And it may be something, and I don't know where this conversation would fit in. It might be a conversation worth having at the study session of council's thoughts on how much they do want administratively approved versus how much they want council involvement. The council members I spoke to wanted more council involvement than administrative approval. So that might be a worth conversation to have because if council majority is okay with staff administratively approving, obviously the things we can, zoning we can, and impact fees we can't, then that could change a bit of the verbiage within it as well. So that would be a conversation that probably needs to happen at the study session as well. But yeah, now if everybody's okay with it, would be a really good time to put a pause on that. If everyone will kind of research, come back with some questions for legal. I have questions as well as that we've documented, and then we'll go into some staff updates.
Okay.
Have at it.
Staff updates. Michael McGinnis with Community Development. First update is in regards to our working with Pollock and Company, consultant group we hired for our Arizona Department of Housing grant. They're in the process of the strategic plan, of creating a strategic plan for the city. And they just concluded interviews with stakeholders. So they're done with that piece, and hopefully we'll see something from them a bit more detailed in the next month or so. The plan was them to quickly get through the strategic plan. They're watching this committee. They're looking at the policy and jumping into the implementation plan of this grant. At the conclusion of this meeting, they did provide us with a summary of regulatory amendments to the City of Prescott Land Development Code to support workforce housing. That might help in what you guys are doing right now with the policy. I'll make sure to hand that out at the end here. Next 2 weeks, we do have a teleconference with Pollock and Company, requesting a volunteer or two from the committee if anybody would like to join us in that. No date has been set yet, so whoever volunteers, I'll coordinate with you to do that. So, Mr. Gregory Reardon, anybody else want to be involved in that? Okay, Randy. All right, and it's really going to be an update. But it's also going to be talking about the next step of this, the implementation piece, which, I'd like to hear. An update in regards to grants. It's been pretty light with grants that are available, especially from the federal level. There's some that are still coming out, but it's pretty light. LIHTC in Arizona failed to get renewed for 2026. That was the big news. From the state that won't be continued in 2026. Yeah, so that was kind of a shock to the whole housing community regarding that. LIHTC is low income housing tax credit, so that is housing providing units really to the 40 to 60% AMI group. And then that is it. That is all I have. Any questions for me?
Is that a year-by-year review process, or is this a supposedly permanent change?
I don't know. All they say is it just hasn't been renewed in 2026. More to be revealed. It was a popular program by developers in Arizona. I think kind of reassess regarding really federal money trickling down to the state. For affordable housing.
Hey, Mike, the consultant, that's being paid out of the $200,000 grant we got, right?
That's correct.
How much of that are we burning on this, and how much is left?
So total is about $130,000. That includes the housing assessment that's completed in draft form. They'll be presenting that to council on the 9th, September 9th. The strategic plan and the implementation of that plan. So we have $60,000 in reserve. Not quite sure what we're going to do with that. Bring that back to committee for guidance.
We're not going to hire anybody with that, though.
Well, and we did talk about with the policy, if it gets approved, there are forms and procedures that will need to be built, the workforce housing criteria. So using some of that funding to have them build those forms for us, because I don't know if we have the staff time at the moment to actually build really good ones, and they're kind of subject matter experts on that. So we might look at utilizing some of those funds to have them build out the staff and procedure portion of a lot of this too. So things that we'll keep everybody updated on as well.
Regarding parking, this is what I got from community development. I know this question came up. It's one per bedroom. Okay, so one per bedroom, one parking space, and then a half space per unit for guest parking.
So a one bedroom would require 1.5 spaces.
Really should push for 2-bedroom for families, so that's why I said 2.5.
All right, and then next agenda right now we have City Attorney Young coming in. I know we talked about having Sandy come. Do we want her at the next one, or do we want to try to have her at the October one so that Joe Young has the entire time if he needs it?
Well, we've got 2 hours. Do you think we need more than an hour with Joe? It seems like there'd be time for both.
We haven't gotten through the whole policy.
Oh, that's true.
I was gonna say,
So, but I know Sandy's wonderful. I have no doubt she'd be happy to be on hand if we were to agendize her and if we had time for the next one, and we could talk to her about being at the October one as well.
So can you reiterate the purpose of Sandy coming? She's been working on a focus group, right, of getting feedback from our industry partners of what's actually important. I wonder if that's timely to this revision process that we might want to hear from her sooner rather than later, but I want to open that up to the committee.
well, guys, we gotta go back and do this density thing. And I don't think it's a 5-minute deal. So we're gonna burn some time in our next meeting revisiting that. Hopefully some creative ideas have come up. And so then we're not done with this policy. We got a long ways to go, right? To get through this.
But we'll absolutely have Sandy come before we have the December study session. So whether it's, yeah, I do imagine we're probably going to take up most of next meeting with the policy, especially with the city attorney. And then we can have her come in October. And then kind of like the last time, I'd love to have it as close to as ready as we can get it at the November meeting, even if it takes that whole meeting. If we need to do another special meeting, we can do that as well, just so we give council, especially since we'll have a fairly new council starting in November, giving them time that we can meet with them one-on-one once they have some time to review the policy, if they have questions ahead of time, just so we're prepared. So, yeah, but that's all I have at this point.
Well, thanks everybody. Meeting adjourned.